with respect to the Conciliation, Advisory and Advocacy Division of the Ministry of Labour, which has launched a national trilingual, that's English, Spanish and French, sexual harassment in the workplace helpline, and that number is 800-CAAD or 800-2223. Now, in studio to tell us a bit more about this new launch and this new hotline is Sabina Gomez. She is the Chief Labor Relations Officer at the Conciliation, Advisory and Advocacy Division of the Ministry of Labour. Good morning and welcome to AM Prime.
Thank you for having me, and I'm very happy to be here.
Excellent. So this is a very important issue because we understand in Trinidad and Tobago, as we go through the motions, so to say, of having a migrant population, all of the issues that come, especially with a non-English speaking population now joining, we have to wonder how are we making accommodations for them to treat with issues and so forth. Tell us a bit more about this project in particular and how exactly it's supposed to enhance the experience of persons tapping into conciliation and all that is being offered by the unit.
All right. Well, we start off, we have a national workplace policy on sexual harassment. So when you have a policy, there's implementation. You have to implement. And how do we implement the policy? And you implement the policy by having activities that will reach the wider working population, because it is a workplace issue that primarily we are focusing on, because it's Ministry of Labour, we're in the workplace. So we do a lot of outreach in terms of going to employers, sensitizing them about the contents of the policy and what is their requirement in terms of the overarching government's response of zero tolerance to sexual harassment in the workplace. We have a dedicated email address where, you know, if persons don't want to come in, they can email us and seek advice. That is shcaad@gov.tt.
Yes.
And we, in order to widen, because we realize that, you know, we're doing this outreach, we're doing the social media, we are on the media, and we're still not getting persons to really access the service as we think and what we hear taking place in the wider environment. So we decided to have a helpline, which we feel if persons want to call in, it's toll-free. So you can call in and seek advice. And this is for employers as well, because sometimes things happen on the workplace and employers are not really prepared or equipped to really handle it and like what to do. So you can call as well. So there's a feature for the employer that the employer can call in. And if you're a French speaker or a Spanish speaker, you have access, and we have on board persons who speak both French and Spanish. And so if you feel comfortable speaking your mother tongue, no problem. We want to have the access as wide as possible.
Of course.
So everybody in this society, it doesn't matter who you are, where you fall, that you have, once you offer your services and the employer accept your services, that you are free to work without being harassed.
Understood. And of course, the pandemic has had a major impact on the workplace. We have now been in discussions about work from home. We are talking about remote work. But also many people are just simply wondering what is now the use of the office. But nonetheless, in Trinidad and Tobago, we are still operating in a space where persons have to go into the office and be there physical. Have we seen over the period any kind of changing trends as it relates to any kinds of abuses or issues that workers, and particularly migrant workers, may be facing now within the job place?
Well, and the migrant community is, you know, in terms of their reach now, most of the issues that we get with migrant workers now relates to non-payment of wages, they working and not being able to get paid. There was one issue, but that was with a national came in and they told us what was taking place with the Venezuelans, you know, what was being requested of them in the workplace, but they didn't come in. So that's why we end up doing a lot of work with organizations like Living Water Community, IOM, and also the Catholic Commission in terms of they have community outreach. And so, and also any NGOs that's treating with migrant issues, we try to reach them so that they in turn would, it's a work in progress.
Understood.
Because you wouldn't get, because I've been working with or interacting with the Living Water community since 2011. And because I did my thesis on migrant rights, so that's how I got involved in that in 2011.
Understood.
So I used to have to go on a Thursday around lunchtime to meet with them because they wouldn't necessarily come unless they're comfortable.
Yes.
Because people have a lot of misconceptions about you know, their status, number one, and then how would we react to it.
Yes.
Right? But, you know, we have a philosophy and our laws in Trinidad and Tobago that once you're a worker, you are covered, you are protected, and you have rights, you have access all the way up to the industrial court if you so wish. And that's why having access to justice is one of the, you know, the pillars that we would want every worker in Trinidad and Tobago, nationals as well as non-nationals,
yes,
to be assured that they have equal access to justice and whatever we have to do in order to make it, you know, to reach the people. Because if you have a policy and you can't reach people or you can't touch their lives to make it better, then what good is it?
Of course.
Right?
So definitely a big takeaway there. If you are a migrant worker in Trinidad and Tobago and you are dealing with abuse in the workplace, especially sexual harassment, you should feel safe and free to contact the ministry. There shouldn't be that fear of I might get deported or what have you. The issue is more important, so I'm definitely getting that. In terms of a person wanting to find out what this process is going to look like. So they being sexually harassed in the workplace, they've decided to call the hotline. So that's 800-2223. What happens from that point onward?
All right, somebody will take the call, and once they take the call, they will get details from you in terms of what the issues are, you know. Now, there's a form attached to our policy which will sort of guide you in terms of details, location, places, place, time, whether there were any witnesses. So we ask questions in order to ascertain, you know, the veracity of what it is that the person is being asked. Then if we find that it's a matter that needs more attention, we may ask you to come in, right? And when you come in, we will deal with you because sometimes there are questions that we need to ask, and one of the things that we want to be able to assure, because, you know, Trinidadians, we don't write. So something will happen on the workplace. Oh, you know, did you write your employer and let your employer know this happened? Sometimes they don't. So what we want is to get the paper trail. So that is so important, even before we pick up the phone and try to intervene at that level, right? We make sure that they're right, because, you know, if it's not written, it never happened.
Yes, yes.
Right? So you have to inform your employer, or if there is someone, now the policy really speaks to a dedicated officer, because a matter like sexual harassment is so sensitive, and it's an accusation that you're making against someone that could change the trajectory of their life. So what we advise, and I think it would be in law, it would be legislated, is that there's a designated person in each organization that will take the complaint in a confidential manner, so that if you go to make an allegation against someone, before it even is investigated, the person has been tried and you know, convicted of everything already. So we want that to be as confidential as possible, so it will be treated in a timely manner, in a particular manner. So those are the things that we want to, first off, did you inform your employer in writing?
Understood.
Right? And so that is one of the things that we guide them towards before we even make an intervention. Because if you have a grievance, you must grieve that this happened. And for the employer side of it now, if the employer calls in, something happens in the workplace, he probably don't have the capacity or whatever to treat with it in terms of having it proper investigated and all of those things. So we also assist in that manner as well.
Gotcha.
Now, when we say sexual harassment, we feel that is, a man perpetuating some
yes, and that was honestly
action against a woman, but we have had all variations in terms of women, same-sex sexual harassment, women sexually harassing men on the workplace, and that's another dimension that we know it's happening. Sometimes we may get calls, some employers, or sometimes mothers may come in and bring their sons.
yes.
And we know it's happening because men, sometimes you may go in a space and you may go to do outreach, and then they will meet you and tell you, well, this happened to me and I really didn't like it. And sometimes even in our sphere, you would see it happening and women take it for granted that they can do it.
Yes.
Right? But you see, when legislation comes, then everybody will have to, our behavior in terms of what is our norm, we like, our cultural, we this touchy-feely kind of people, and then carnival and you have a, and then sometimes when you go on retreats, or you may go on a setting that is not your normal work setting, people feel that they can behave differently.
Yes.
But then that is your workplace is not only where you come to work every day and you rest your bag and you sit down, but it could be, some people feel, well, if I meet in the car park, we outside of work, so I can do whatever. Or if you go, on a lime, everybody at work go together on a line. Well, you figure, everybody take a drink, and well, I can do whatever I want to.
Here.
But no, but that is not it.
Yes.
They have the working environment, right?
Yes.
You could go away on a trip. The employer could send you away on a trip, and you and a co-worker go, and then things happen when you reach abroad, because you say, we outside of work now. So, nope.
And I'm really glad that you're raising it in that way, because a lot of people, we have to, for them, demystify what sexual harassment in the workplace looks like. Because as you rightfully say, we are reconciling that culture that is Trinidad and Tobago, where we feel it's okay to Tifa wine, for instance, but you can't Tifa wine in the workplace. And what are some of the, what would be some of the advice you would give to persons in terms of being able to identify themselves as being a victim of sexual harassment in the workplace?
Well, even in the definition, now when we were drafting this policy, there was no fixed definition, right? But the industrial court, in its wisdom, they have been treating with issues of sexual harassment, 3 disputes that would have gone to them. And the first one would have been the Republic Bank judgment, and the other judgments coming down from that. They would have given a definition of any physical, could be physical, verbal, non-verbal, and we're in the age of social media and emojis and all of that, sending graphics, sending email messages, WhatsApp, I mean, the whole realm, you could do it, and now we have disappearing messages, you send somebody, and before they could grab a screenshot, a Venezuela national came in, he had an issue, and he said he went to the police with it, and as he was showing them the WhatsApp messages, it just disappeared right there in front of them.
And
so,
they're editing messages as well, so you can write something and go back and
edit it if you didn't screenshot it. So, I mean, all of these things that we have to think about. And then, you ask this question about how do we identify it. And, you have dimensions in terms of, the quid pro quo. Sometimes somebody on the job and they're getting all the favors, they're getting all the training. Every time a promotion comes up, they're right there with it. They're the favored ones, and you sitting down there and, you may be senior to that person, but you're not going anywhere because this person. So that's the quid pro quo. And then the other one is the hostile working environment. When the person make advances to you and you rebuff them, the work becomes a hostile working environment, because basically they want you to leave, but they don't want to fire you, because if they fire you unfairly, they will have to compensate you. So they want you, they will frustrate you to leave the job, and that's by, they may be shouting at you, verbally abusing you, doing everything possible that will make you uncomfortable for you to leave, because you didn't acquiesce to their demands. So, you sort of look to see if there are any one of those dimensions in what would have transpired after what happened.
And well, if I could, because we're clearly talking about what forms of redress are available, how to remedy those situations if they were to happen, and so on. But if we are to look at the preventative aspect of it, because you've mentioned that there is that workplace policy, so the information is there, the guidelines are there as to what the work environment really should look like. But turning that into a practical kind of thing is a bit more difficult, I would imagine.
Yes.
What is being done, whether from the Ministry of Labour standpoint or any other agencies, to really promote that healthy environment? Because there are a lot of people who would say, well, I don't know about any workplace policy, I don't know about this, that, and the other. But you would think that it would be commonplace to have this knowledge that this is what you should or should not be doing. But what efforts are being taken?
All right, that's why we have a heavy outreach program. In terms of organizations, some of them will write us and tell us, to come in and do it. So we do that with their staff because they, in turn, each organization is supposed to have their own policy. Now, there are some proactive organizations where there's a recognized majority union, and you find that when we are drafting the policy, that's our source we have to get, because it has to be evidence or data driven. So we go to sources, and there were unions and employers who sat together and they had sexual harassment clauses in their collective agreement, which when registered at the court, would become sort of the legal framework that will guide the employer-employee relationship. So we have in organizations that already were ahead of us in terms of what we do. But in terms of orientation, having orientation meetings with your staff to letting them know that you really have zero tolerance and you want to shape the behavior. Yes. Because that's the whole thing, and even within the public service, you find, cultural transformation is now, the big thing, because, with COVID, as you mentioned, as you rightly said, so there was a shift, right? Some workspaces never really went back. Some workspaces still operate on a hybrid level, right? So that in itself is a cultural shift in terms of how we operate and how we do and how we conduct business. So we're just inching, going a little bit further. And, I always make this analogy that, we were people that we didn't like to wear seat belts, right? Nobody liked to buckle up.
Perfect example.
And now everybody buckling up, right? So sometimes you may find that, okay, how could you change our behavior? That's what we are accustomed to, right? And now that you're kind of like placing people in a way that they have to think before they take any action.
There are consequences,
right?
And
and because there are some employers believe that they can do it because they have money I could pay.
Yeah. Right?
So what? And maybe some employers profile workers to hire. Right? If they're vulnerable, they probably have low educational attainment. So they must say, you should be so lucky that I hire you. Yes. Right? So therefore, I have my own little harem. I can do whatever I want. And, and some people are socialized. They're very quiet. They won't take any action. So they may have tested the waters a little bit to see how far they can go.
Yeah. It's
right?
Like
so,
yeah. But even if you're looking at that, because there may very well be that person who is looking on right now and feeling helpless and hopeless in a situation where they feel, one, my boss is a big influential individual who, if I report, it may end up turning around on me. And also, if I report this and I lose my job, because let's say the boss gets in trouble or the organization and I lose my job, I have nowhere else to turn to. How do we reconcile those issues in terms of getting persons to still come forward, feel comfortable enough to report, and more than anything, understanding that this is the right thing to do, still balancing all of those other factors?
And that's something that is really, at the foremost at the foremost of our mind when persons come in seeking advice. Whatever we do, we try not to, let people, lose a job, because sometimes they may come with a scenario or situation that they're facing, and, they may tell us of the situation that they are in, right? So therefore, we don't jump and get on the phone and call the employer. So sometimes a simple thing has to be giving them brochures to distribute, let the employer know that you went to the Ministry of Labor without letting him know that you went.
Yes.
And you give it to, so we'd give them brochures and say, look, put it on your desk, go give it to everybody. So when he comes around, you open it and you start reading. Simple things like that, because, sometimes when people lose a job, I mean, that is a traumatic thing. It's like a death sentence you pass on them. So we don't want anybody to place in a situation. Yes, the employer will have to do the investigation, and workers always have redress. They feel free to join a union and bring their matter forward, and that is, you don't have to be in a unionized environment. And even employers feel that the workers cannot, because they will tell you, well, my workplace is not unionized. But then we go back to freedom of association. Any worker could join any union of their choice, right, if they feel aggrieved on the job.
Yes.
But we always advise workers, before you do anything, you must write your employer. And you must tell your employer, what is your grievance, how you're being frustrated, and, what it is taking place. You must put it in writing.
Understand.
Right? And especially with issues with sexual harassment, even if it happened one time, still report it, because there was a person who came into us, and it happened to her before, and the person begged her not to come forward, and she agreed, and later on, it happened again, and this time when she went forward to report it, everybody turned on her in the organization. They started bullying her and harass her, and women were included in that bullying and harassing, because why would you go and make a report on him? And it wasn't one of power. As a matter of fact, she was senior to him. Okay. Right, but he had popularity. Right, he was popular with everybody, and when she came forward, everybody turned on her. She became the butt of jokes. They were ridiculing her, bullying her, and harassing her on the job for coming forward. So all of these things happen on the workplace.
Now, there's definitely so much. I mean, we could sit here and go on and on, because these conversations are so very important. For instance, you mentioned coming to the Ministry of Labor and reporting on issues that happen. And I know, as much as, let's say, persons may not be fully sensitized or aware of all that goes into reporting and what you can expect from the Ministry of Labor, I hear quite often people say, I'm going to report them to the Labor Board. So they have it in their mind that this process exists and so on. But it's really about closing the gap, providing that more information in the workplace. So sharing brochures, I can see that really making a difference in empowering people. As we wrap on the interview and coming back to this app here, or the hotline rather, is it a 24/7 hotline?
No,
what are the hours?
It's a helpline for now. It come like a pilot project, and we are looking to see, how, and why it's important to do programs like this is to let the population know that there is a service that is available to you. Right? So right now it's available during working hours, 8 to 4, you can call in, maybe, 5, somebody will answer, because our staff, sometimes we read their long hours, but once we know that you're there, you could send us an email, and we will contact you and follow up with you on your issues.
Understood. And just to remind persons that the helpline provides support to all victims of sexual harassment in the workplace, including employers, employees, and migrant workers. And the helpline, it is staffed with trained Conciliation, Advisory and Advocacy Division staff members, and you have the option to remain anonymous. And I think that is so very important as persons kind of test the waters, so to say, because they want to make sure that the individual really provides that safe space and so on. So you can start off anonymously, and I guess as you feel a bit more comfortable, you reveal more and more information. But any final thoughts that you want to share on this that the population should be aware of?
Well, it's just that we want you all to use the service. The service is available, and that is how we try to give everyone, each citizen, and not only citizens, but non-nationals who are working within our space, that you are protected, and there should be zero tolerance to sexual harassment or any type of harassment in the workplace. And employers as well, because it's your duty and responsibility to provide a safe working environment for your workers who come to work. Workers should not be harassed when they come to provide a service and to assist you in building your business. So that is something that you ought to be aware of. And it's also a health and safety issue.
Of course.
If you cannot provide that safe space for persons who come in to work in your establishment, or even persons coming to visit, and we haven't touched on that as yet. Yeah. There are so many issues around that, or even sometimes persons who observe what's taking place. They and all could be traumatized. And that is why, psychosocial support with those organizations who can't do it is very important,
Yes.
To do that in the workplace, because it can be very traumatizing, and it could be very divisive in terms of splitting organizations, believe who believe this one and who believe the other one. So there are a whole different set of issues that could, yes, exactly, so especially if you're working a place where you know that you went to your employer and it's not being investigated, or it could even be the employer himself,
yes,
who owned the business.
That adds
and that's another dimension as well.
But unfortunately, we have to leave it there. I think that this conversation was so very important. Thank you so much for coming onto the program and sharing. Just to remind folks, if you're interested in finding out more, you can visit the Ministry of Labor's website as well as their social media accounts. And you can also call 299-0300 extension 2043, and that's the Conciliation Advisory and Advocacy Division. But if you want the number for the hotline, it's 800-CAAD, that's 800-2223.